Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, sir.
I'm sure you have more energy than that. Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, sir.
That's what I like to hear. How are you all this morning?
We're fine, thank you.
That's good to hear. All right, so I'd like to firstly thank obviously the Asherville Library for giving me this time today to speak to all of you guys. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Naushad Khan, and I am a published author and entrepreneur. But I wasn't always like this. My story starts in the library, the Asherville Library to be accurate. When I was 5 years old, my parents took me to the library and they applied for a library card, not just for myself, but for each of them as well. Now, like Mondley explained, you can borrow up to 7 books on a library card. At the time that I was going to the library, you could borrow up to 8 books on a library card for a period of 2 weeks. However, I was privileged enough that I was allowed to borrow up to 24 books through all 3 of my parents' cards. Because my parents had a library card, both of them, including myself. So obviously, if you take 8 times 3, it gives you 24 books. So I used to borrow up to 24 books, but I wouldn't need the 2-week period because within a matter of 1 week, all 24 books were read and ready to be returned back to the library, only for me to leave the library yet again with another set of 24 books to read and enjoy for another week. I can tell you some of my favorite books growing up. I enjoyed The Adventures of Tintin. I enjoyed The Adventures of Asterix and Obelix. But as I got older, I enjoyed more mature books, more novels. So I think I enjoyed a book called The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It eventually became a movie later on. And my favorite book of all time was Hover Car Racer by Matthew Riley. I believe it is in the Asherville Library. If you guys go over to the library, you'll be able to find it, or any of the other libraries. Maybe, I'm sure they have that book as well. So yeah, I used to read a whole lot of books, and when you read books, your vocabulary increases. You learn new words, whether it's a fiction book or a non-fiction book. Now, a non-fiction book, you gain a lot of knowledge. You learn a lot of things. With a fiction book, you also learn a lot of things, but you're increasing your vocabulary. So sometimes you'll be studying or you'll be reading a book or one of your homework or assignment, you'll come across a word that you don't understand. And sometimes you'd ask your parents, your teachers, or you'd consult with a dictionary to see what the word means. But if you're reading on a constant basis like I was reading 24 books at a time, my vocabulary was so high that I didn't need help from a dictionary or a parent or a teacher, because I knew how to pronounce all the words, say them, understand what they meant as well. So that's why I'm encouraging all of you to read, okay? Now, because I was so into reading and I was so just into this mode of reading, my mind on its own just started conjuring up ideas, just out of nowhere. So I grabbed a pencil, I grabbed any scrap piece of paper I could get my hands on. At the age of 5, I was already writing stories of my own imagination that would just come up with ideas at any time. So, you know when you're 5 years old, you come up with childish ideas. So my first ideas were like talking dinosaurs, kids going on voyage to space, which are unrealistic, but when you're 5 years old, that's very real to you in your own mind. But as I matured and as I got older, I wrote more and more mature stories. Sometimes I think my stories were far too mature for my own self, because at the age of 10 years old, I was writing a Western novel. For those who don't know, a Western novel is basically your Wild Wild West, your cowboys and red Indians, that kind of stories. So at the age of 10, for a 10-year-old to be writing a Western novel at that time was like unheard of. My parents themselves were shocked that their own son was writing a story of a Western novel. Then I went on to high school. I continued writing. I never stopped. I always loved writing and reading as well. I always consistently was in the library. I used to visit both the Asherville Library and the Musgrave Library. The Musgrave Library at the time was in Musgrave Center, but now they've moved to Glenwood Village where the spa is. You'll find them near there. So when I was, I believe, 17 years old, during the December 2011 holidays, I was in grade 11, and it was the December holidays at the time, I came up with an idea called Race Champ. And how that idea came about was just me exposing myself to so many different mediums of reading or watching, different movies. And then in my mind just started conjuring up ideas on its own of a story about a race car driver who wants to achieve his goals. And that's how I came up with the story of Race Champ. There's my book right there. It's called Race Champ Part 1, The Oval Tar. As the title suggests, it's the first in what is said to be a trilogy that I'm still working on publishing the second and third part. They're already written, I'm just working on getting them published now. So the idea of Race Champ is a story of a young racer named Jason Woods, who wants nothing more than to just be in the pro racing scene. So he starts where any racer starts off, and that's at the Oval Tar. It's a legal racetrack where racers get their start, and obviously, hopefully, some manager or agent, racing agent, will come up to them and say, we're taking you to the big leagues, which is obviously the world racing scene. But they all start at the Oval Tar. So when I wrote this whole book, I originally wrote it as one story. However, when I was done, I realized it's too big. It needs to be split up into 3 parts. So I split it up into 3 parts. And the next year, I finished my matric. And then I started a very long and arduous journey of trying to get published for 8 long years. When I started working, I saved up, I invested in myself, and I got a phone where I typed out the story, because no publisher is going to accept any story that is handwritten nowadays. Everything is typed out. You guys should know this better than anyone. Technology is king these days. Everyone is moving into the technology world. However, books are still a thing. So, for 8 years I struggled. I was going from publisher to publisher. Some people didn't want to publish me, others didn't want to work with me, and that's fine. I didn't give up. And that's the main thing, is when you hit a roadblock, you should never give up. For example, some of you want to become engineers, accountants. You're going to go on to university after you complete your high school, and you will come across challenges. But that does not mean the challenges are there to stop you. The challenges are just there to test how far you're willing to go to achieve what it is you want to achieve. Your goal, when you come into contact with these obstacles, is to overcome them and not let them prevent you from achieving what you want to achieve. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't let rejection from publishers stop me from getting published. I kept going at it and going at it until eventually I met a publisher who read my book and said, okay, we're going to publish you. And that was the breakthrough, an 8-year journey coming to a culmination of getting the one yes. And many of you know about, who here knows J.K. Rowling? Okay, J.K. Rowling. Who here knows Harry Potter, the very famous movie series? Yes, Harry Potter, before it was a movie series, was actually a series of books written by an author named J.K. Rowling. She took the idea of Harry Potter to 12 different publishers, and she got rejected by all 12 of them. But she didn't let 12 rejections stop her. When she went to the 13th publisher, and normally sometimes 13 is not a good luck number, in Chinese 13 is a good luck number actually, but she went to the 13th publisher, and it was lucky number 13 because that publisher picked her up and said, we're going to publish you. Same story with me. I got picked up and I got published. And it was like a journey coming to a head. But sometimes you'll think you're reaching the finish line, but you're actually not. Because when my book was getting published, it was January of 2020, 8 years after I started my journey of trying to get published. Who here knows what happened on March 2020? It concerns President Cyril Ramaphosa. Okay, for those who don't know, that is when we entered something called a hard lockdown to prevent the spread of coronavirus, or COVID-19 as it is technically called. So when that happened, everything closed down, including the publisher that I was working with at the time. And they told me that we had just done everything, the layout, the cover design, and actually I want to bring up the cover because there's a saying, and I don't know if you've heard it, it's called, don't judge a book by its cover. Yes. However, when I published this book, I wanted to change that narrative because I want everybody to judge this book by its cover. When you look at this book, what do you see? You see cars, you see championship belts, and that is exactly what you get in Race Champ. So it's not necessarily always what you see on the cover is not what you get inside. Sometimes what you see on the cover is indeed what you get inside. So they had done the cover design and everything. They were going into printing. However, that's when the lockdown hit. And I was just down on my luck again. I was like, man, I'm so close and the world is closing up on me again. However, I learned that patience is a virtue. That's when I learned that patience is a virtue, because 3 months later, we were lowered down to level 3, printers opened up, and my book was finally published in September of 2020. I had my book launch in November of that year at my ex-primary school, which was like a homecoming, because in my primary school, I used to write stories in the classroom, and kids used to make fun of me. You know, sometimes you have a person in your classroom, and to you, maybe, they seem odd, they seem weird, they seem like they don't belong. But there's no need to make fun of them. I was bullied, I was made fun of, but I didn't let that stop me. I didn't give in to peer pressure and say, because these other kids are making fun of me, I should join them. I used it as a motivation to continue pursuing what it is I wanted to pursue. I didn't let that stop me. So for me to walk back into my own primary school as a published author, the place where I was sitting in classrooms and getting papers slung at me because I was writing books and I was not like everybody else, was a homecoming moment, because it's like returning of the prodigal child. That's what it felt like. And I had my book launch at the school, and some of you here may be one day standing up here presenting. It may not be for the library, it may be for some other organization that you're working for, presenting in your own primary school where you were brought up and given your values. So you could actually be returning here one day, and trust me when I tell you, you are going to miss this place. It doesn't matter what primary school it is. When you go to high school, it's a whole nother ball game. And I had to learn that firsthand. So enjoy your time right now as you are in primary school. So after getting published, I was in newspapers. I was in the Weekly Gazette. I was in the Rising Sun. Do any of you read the newspapers? The Weekly Gazette, the Rising Sun, they come, you know, free community newspapers. You should pick them up, you should read them. That's also where you increase your knowledge and you also learn more vocabulary. So it's a win-win. So when I was in the newspapers, people were contacting me, asking me, how did I get published? And so I came across one person who said, I have a book, and I've also gone through a similar journey as you, and I would like to get published. Can you show me? And that really struck my mind, because I was like, okay, I could actually help others get published as well, just like myself. So his name was Mohammed Zahir, and he wrote a book called The Map to Alagia. There's it right there. At the time that I got it, it wasn't a fully fledged book. It was just a manuscript on a Microsoft Word document. I'm sure some of you know what Microsoft Word is. And it's a program on a computer where you can type out stories. So I edited it, I did the layout and cover design, and I published his book for him the very next year, 2021, in March of that year. And that's when I decided that there's a need in the community, because I went through an 8-year struggle. If I can help others get published, other budding authors, other people who, just like myself, visited the library, sat in the library, read books, and then went on to become writers, that's what created Multi-Marketing. Multi-Marketing is a publishing company. It's actually a holding company for many of my other business interests. I do website designs. I help other YouTubers and bloggers. I do marketing campaigns for other companies. But my main source is the publishing. So that's where I decided to come up with Multi-Marketing Publishing. I help a lot of authors. I even helped a lady by the name of Kim Bagshaw publish her book called William. So as you can see, I can stand here before you all and say that I am a published author and an entrepreneur, and it's not a lie because I have the proof right here. But where did it all start? Can anybody tell me? Yes. Reading. And where did it all start? Anybody? You? Library. That's correct. I sat in the library, I borrowed books 24 at a time. I'm not saying you guys should borrow 24 at a time, because I'm sure that you still need to start reading before you can get up to the level of borrowing 24 at a time. But yes, go to the Asherville Library or any other library, wherever you are in your area, pick up books, read them, because like Roshni said, readers are leaders. If you read now, you will become leaders in the future. Is there any questions? No. Okay. Thank you all, boys and girls.